So welcome everybody to a Tilt webinar with Dr. Kevin Gaugler, Post-Pandemic Language Instruction. What should stay and what should go? This is being held by ALL and Tilt, the Technology in Language Teaching. So who are we? I'm Helen Myers. That's my Twitter handle, and I'm chair of the London branch of the Association for Language Learning. We always acknowledge Heike Philp and Linguiscope who help us to set things up. But the most important person here who has scouted all this wonderful talent is Jo Dale. So over to you, Jo Dale, to tell us who you are and what you've got to offer. And you can introduce Kevin later.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So absolutely wonderful to be here for the latest Tilt webinar. As everyone I'm sure knows, I'm an independent languages consultant, former languages teacher, making a living through lots of webinars, a little bit of face-to-face now. I've done a couple of face-to-face sessions, which has been wonderful since the start of September, but mostly working through webinars. So in the chat, as per normal, I've put a list of 18 example sessions. If you would be interested in inviting me in to do a webinar or a face-to-face session, there's plenty to choose there, and I can design something bespoke for you. And it would be lovely to do that. We've done over 130 Tilt webinars. There's lots of free content there, but of course I have to make a living as well. And I'd love to hear from you if you're interested. Okay, let's get back to the main dish today.
Okay, and thanks very much, Jo, for all you do. The Association for Language Learning, whether you're in this country or in another country and you belong to an association, can you just advertise it now and say, I'm in an association, it's a good thing, perhaps say why it is good. Because we do feel, certainly the ALL, we feel that it's really important to have a voice for language teachers, especially at the moment, and especially with what we're going through in the UK, but I'm sure everywhere as well. It's so important, and it brings so much. It brings people together. We're not a political organisation, but we do help people to talk to each other across the sectors. And that helps you to articulate your message when you are trying to speak to those people who are making policy decisions. So if you're not a member, please do join. If you are a member, tell everybody to join in. There's Helen McFarlane. Always you can rely on her to tell you to join. We've got other webinars coming soon. There's a QR code for you to look at there, and there's also a website address there, which I'll put in the chat later on. So as Jo was saying, we've been doing all of these webinars. And the ones which are coming up are here, where we've got Tilt 1 coming up again October the 14th. Another Tilt 1 is coming up on November the 14th. So we've got things coming up. Also ALL things. For example, next week, next Tuesday, I'm going to be leading something about the Ofsted Research Review webinar. We've already done one telling you about it, but this is where we as members can get together and say, how are we going to prepare for inspectors? So those things are coming up. But this is what you're all here for. Over to Jo now to introduce our speaker.
Lovely. Thank you, Helen. So we're really honoured, I think, tonight to have Dr. Kevin Gaugler, who is a real inspiration to me. I've been in a couple of workshops that Kevin has done over the years. I've watched numerous videos as well of him presenting, and he's one of the experts in the field to do with EdTech and languages in the US. So thank you so much for offering to do this. We have met face-to-face a couple of times at ACFL, and it's lovely that Barbara Lindsay here is as well, who I've also attended workshops that she has done, and she's also an absolute inspiration. I'm sure we can persuade her to do a Tilt webinar for us later on in 2022. But without further ado, I'd love to hand over to Kevin, who hot-footed here from his lesson, which finished at around 1/4 the hour. So yeah, we got here in time, which is brilliant. And let's sit back, enjoy. I've got no idea what Kevin's going to talk about, apart from obviously it's going to be to do with EdTech and languages. He's encouraging people to ask questions. And it sounds as if, disagree if need be, etc. So let's go for it. Let's see what Kevin's going to talk about. And thank you so much for doing this. It's going to be inspirational, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jo. And I just have to say, it's very impressive what you and all are putting together, these series of webinars to try to create this professional learning environment for folks and providing it all for free. It's absolutely fantastic. And the fact that there's an international group here is really, I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to share ideas in an international group like this. And I recognize when I'm going to present, or at least we can maybe think about it as at least a launching pad for a conversation is, maybe I have a few things wrong with my title, calling it post-pandemic language instruction, because we're not necessarily post. I'm post something from last year. And also I completely recognize that, I'm going to try to describe a little bit what I went through during the pandemic and how I was involved at my own institution of higher education to try to tackle this problem, particularly in my field, but it went certainly beyond language instruction. And each one of your situations, I would imagine you're going to find points of where you're nodding your head and saying, yes, this is exactly what I went through. And then others, you're going to say that wasn't my situation. And that's okay too. I think we're all going to learn from this. One of the things, when Joe asked me to speak, I've been thinking about this a lot at my own institution, that we are not, as an institution, discussing this idea of what should stay and what should go. I liked, obviously, the reference to the Clash song, but I think there was a real opportunity here in education to shake the tree, to rethink everything from the ground up. And we were all forced to do this, for better or for worse, in this crisis. And so if we don't take that opportunity to reflect and see, what were we doing pre-pandemic that really should be thrown out or rethought? And then what did we adjust in this new situation that, most of the colleagues I've spoken to, it's not all bad. They will all say that there are things that they have realized, at least through this process, that they're going to take with them, or at least reflect on more to improve their teaching and beyond. So I thought I would use my own experience as a catalyst for you to think about, to take the time to be a little bit reflective. And so feel free to jump in with comments and questions, because I think, again, we have folks from Colombia, we have folks from all the way to Australia, as well as, teaching different languages and at different levels. And I'm sure the way that the pandemic was addressed really affected the way your instruction was delivered. And so you're going to have different experiences. Oops, let me go back. So just to kind of let you know where the environment I am is and how this all came about, I'm a professor of Spanish at Marist College. We're on the banks of the Hudson River, just north of New York City, private liberal arts college with approximately 5,000 students. And so we are reliant on dormitories being full to complete our balance sheets, right? So a fully online experience would have been a massive loss in revenue for the college. And so it was very important for the college's own health and existence to come up with a solution that would maintain students on campus, but also be safe, right? And so we did not go fully online. We did it first in March of 2020. Everything went from one week to the other, fully on the ground to fully online. And so I am not going to include that in my presentation, that part. It was much more of a scramble to try to do whatever we possibly could to complete the semester between March and what ended in May for us, right? However, I had the summer to really be part of a committee on campus to really rethink in a methodical way how we were going to deliver instruction starting in the fall. And so we worked on a plan for the entire campus, and also tried to work on a training module, an online training module to help people maneuver the coming year. And so parts of this, I'm not going to go through the entire training module and the entire plan that I helped put together, but I'd like to take my time to really show you, the skeletal part of it, and then how I implemented it in my own language classes. And then, showing you what I think, what has stayed, even though we're fully on the ground now, this year, right? So last year I deployed this method, and then this year we're fully on the ground with masks. But I'm still using much of what I used last year, because I found that in my own situation, it improved student engagement by quite a bit, and students were speaking more. They were more confident about their language output. I was providing more authentic input to them. And so I'll show you some of those examples. And then again, jump in anytime with your own questions or comments. Okay, so this is part of what we showed to our faculty here at the college. We called it hybrid instruction with a twist of lemon, because we looked at all the literature out there on flexible hybrid instruction, on blended instruction, and none of it covered that at any given moment, it can just all go online. At any given moment, whatever you do can unravel, and you're teaching a completely online class. So we decided how do you design a course that, and so the main model at Marist was hybrid. Divide your classes in half. You meet half the class socially distanced on the ground. Half of them will do instruction online, right? And then you meet the other half of the class another day of the week. So each class would meet twice a week, and you would basically have this half online, half on the ground instruction, knowing that could go online any minute for the entire class, or for individual members of the class as they got COVID. Now, I'm not sure if you're, and that's exactly what happened. I had students out at 2 weeks at a time who had completely online instruction, and then would hop back on for the hybrid model. How do you design a class and still have it function well, right? Essentially what we found you have to do is design an online course. You basically have to start with the premise that this course is going to be completely online. And then you have to think, step 2 would be, okay, if I have them for 1 hour a week face-to-face, what is the best use of that time? What am I going to do with those students in 1 hour a week that's going to really justify the fact that they showed up physically, that I can't do online? And I think that fundamental question was very valuable in my own reflective process as an instructor. Why are we together physically? And so I'll show you how I answered some of those questions. But to kind of communicate this in a very simple way to our instructors, we use the metaphor of cooking. And so one of the jokes that we had was we called the previous semester, the March 2020, when everything unraveled in the United States in March of 2020, we called that the nailed it semester. So I don't know if you've seen this show, but there's a show on Netflix where they have these fancy cakes, and they get regular people to bake these cakes, and they look terrible. And then when they reveal this awful mess of a cake, they say, nailed it. That's how we all felt. It felt like a game show. You have to design a completely online course. You have 48 hours, go. And so we found, and no one had any instruction in how to design an online course. Many folks didn't. And they would just turn around their cake of a class, and it would be a mess. And we'd just say nailed it and put our hands up. So that was okay in an emergency, but was not going to cut it for the following entire year of instruction. Okay, so let me move to my next slide. It's not clicking through. What's going on? My slides are stuck. Oh, here we go. Whoops, go back. Now they're going through like crazy. Okay, I'm going to go back. So in my own situation, I re-engineered 3 of the 4 classes that are up here. These are the classes that I was teaching that year. A conversation course in the bottom left called Communicating in the Spanish-Speaking World. A culture course on Spain, Cultures of Spain, taught in the target language, taught in Spanish. An introduction to literature in the bottom right-hand corner. Experience in Hispanic literature. Those were my 3 different classes, and I think they kind of represent a pretty good swath of many of the things we teach as language instructors. So I have experience and I deployed the same exact model for all 3 of those classes. Reason why I'm separating the other class in the top right corner, Spanish in the Workplace, is because that is a class that I'm teaching for the first time ever right now. And even though I'm meeting face-to-face in that class, I used the exact same method I used last year to build the class for this year, because I found the method so valuable that I thought I would just continue to do it this way for the foreseeable future. So what is that method? So I can start with any one of those courses as an example, but I thought I would start with the conversation course, since it's probably closer to what many of us, we could probably, I figured the widest swath of people could relate to some of the activities that I do in that class, because we're all teaching conversation at some level. So one of the basic, and again, we created an entire learning platform on how to do this. And in some ways, I'm not reinventing, I'm not inventing anything new. What we did was we used a lot of the research that's already out there on effective online instruction. Effective instruction, period. And then, and also online, but what it forced me to do is, when you're building an online course, those of you, I'm sure there are many of you in the group here who have a lot of experience teaching online. I did not have a lot of experience teaching fully online. And that experience forces you to be much more purposeful, much more direct in your instructions and your learning objectives. And so what I'm about to show you, these are learning objectives for one unit, unit 4, right? Now I used a book, like many of you do, for this conversation class, and they had this unit. The title of the unit came right from the book, Ways of Living, right? Maneras de vivir, ways of living. And the book had pretty generic examples of different ways of living. They kind of grouped people by cliques, people who were into rock and roll, or people who were into hippie music, or people, they kind of tried to give different adjectives for describing different activities people were into, sports fanatics and skaters and things like that. I thought this was a good opportunity to talk about diversity, right? Title that, ways of living, it seemed like a missed opportunity to really kind of dive in a little bit deeper. So, but just to give you some of these learning objectives I inserted, but some of them came directly from, larger departmental learning objectives and from the book. But, we want students to be able to give advice and make proposals on suggestions. We wanted them to be able to talk about personal qualities of people, physical qualities, feelings, someone's personal character, and describe what they were looking for in, what kind of groups they associated with, or what they were looking for in friends or the groups that they identify with. So those were the objectives over 2 weeks, what we were going to do over 2 weeks. Now, let me back up real quickly and say, I can show you this module if you want. I thought it would be more effective to kind of cut and paste certain parts to kind of focus our attention here. But at the end, if we have time, I'd be happy to kind of go through and show you how this is all put together in our learning management system. so that it looks like one holistic thing. But you know, I broke up my class into modules, into units, and each module lasted about 2 weeks. All 4 of my classes, literature, conversation, no matter, each one lasts, depending on the course, 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks. I have 3 or 4 modules, objectives, 3 or 4 learning objectives. And I have some exit ticket. Some people call it an exit ticket or culminating assignment at the end of that module that directly relates to the learning objectives. Can you show me those learning objectives, right? Those are my formative assessments. And I'll just explain what my summative assessments are a little bit later, because I had to rethink those completely as well. So what we're looking at here is the culminating assignment or exit ticket or whatever you might want to call it. And what they had to do was, I had a YouTube video that kind of modeled similarly what they had to do, but they had to create a video of them giving advice to new students coming into the campus on, you know, basically tips on how to survive, different ways of living inside of a dormitory. So you have to live in a dorm with all these different kinds of people. What are some tips on how to do that? So they're giving advice, they're talking about personal characteristics. They had to fold in those learning objectives into that piece of advice. So they had to do it like a YouTube video. You've all seen YouTube videos like this, you know, 10 tips for living with your roommate, you know, subscribe to my channel, right? That kind of thing. So they had an example like that from YouTube, which they could kind of draw on to create their own. So right now, that completely changes. This project-driven module now completely changes how I think about in-class time. Because they have the objectives right up front. They have up front this final project that's due in a couple of weeks. They have the book with all the different phrases that they might use. They have all these YouTube videos and other texts that I'll show you as models to get them to that point. And so what do we use class time for? Well, they have questions. They can work out scenarios. They can work in groups towards this project. And really utilize that face-to-face time for that interaction, right? And of course, if I didn't get to that, oh, I'm seeing this comes up. Oh, here we go. So I'm not going to play the video, but just so you know, this is a little animated video of someone in Spanish giving some tips on what to do to live with others, right? So I try to have it, what having, you know, forcing me to push everything online made me really dig hard to find good examples of models that they could use to imitate, to mimic, to draw from, to pull vocabulary and key phrases to then be able to produce. So great input, right? Great comprehensible input to be able to then eventually, you know, absorb it over a couple of weeks and create some output. Some meaningful, personally meaningful output. Should I stop at this point and ask if there are questions?
We haven't got any questions so far.
Okay.
But one thing that came to mind was when you were talking about the group was divided into 2, and you taught half the group for 2 lessons a week, and then the other half for another time. Was that down to student choice, or did you choose? So what I'm saying is, were there some students who had to be at home the whole time, or chose to be at home the whole time, or how was that actually managed? Was it you that chose how the groups were divided up, or was it down to the students? And was it exactly, if that was the case, was it exactly half and half, or was it more that you had that more people were at home, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there was an A and a B group that I got to choose. I basically, before the class started, I emailed everyone, said, you're in group A, you're only coming Mondays, and you're in group B and you're only coming Thursdays. And I knew some of the students and I looked up some of their experiences and I tried to balance it based on whatever I thought would be the best mix for many different reasons. Maybe I knew a little bit about their linguistic abilities. Maybe I knew I wanted, a gender balance, that kind of thing. I found that mostly if I went alphabetically, it kind of balanced out anyway. So I didn't try to engineer that too much. But yes, I also had students, we had a policy that a student could say, I want to be virtual and go virtual for the rest of the semester. So there were some students who would then, for their 1 day a week, would be beamed in via Zoom, which made it even more complex, right? Especially if we wanted to do group work, right? It started to become a little bit, if a student had their laptop, I would just put them in a group with a student who had the laptop, right? Now, one of the things that was great about the pandemic that stuck is it created a common denominator of technology, right? For everyone, that for better or for worse, all I had to do was say, go on Zoom, and everyone could do it. There was no fumbling around or teaching people. That common denominator of technology really ramped up what we were able to do with the technology, right? That we weren't fumbling around with, which tool and how, and trying to, that's something that should not be ignored. Anyway, to be able to, so basically, I think one way to think about it, and I'm sure many of you did this as well, we've talked about flipping instruction forever, right? We've talked about project-based learning forever. What this forced me to do was kind of flip it to the extreme, where I was pushing as much instruction as possible online and asynchronously. And I had to be very strategic and have very targeted synchronous face-to-face interactions with my students. So it was hyper flipped. And so so that's really, I think, the difference between some of the experiments that have gone out with just putting your grammar instruction in a video to having instruction, all the assignments, all the projects, scaffolding, all put online. And you're just there to kind of to help push that system along. And so what I found that it did by creating this online system is it differentiated the learning almost without trying to differentiate the learning. That the students all of a sudden, by creating, for example, the example I have in front of you, providing lots of examples in YouTube, right? And I could show you how I used, in a minute, I'll talk about some of the tools that I used to pull all this off. But having lots of examples, lots of commercials. I used tons of commercials, right? And I even found folks who had channels who've already curated commercials for classes. Once I started going down that road, I struck oil a lot, right? And it took hours. I mean, I'm sure it was the most time I spent was in curating the material to find very good, engaging, and short videos that would really grab the students, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to, if I were just lecturing, they would naturally be grabbed by whatever I had to say, right? That was the old attitude. But now I wasn't there. I wasn't there to grab them. So what was going to grab them? I had to find content that really drew them in, right? So I found, I wish, I probably don't have time, but I will send this link to you of my presentation so folks can download it and see the videos. Because I think it's worth going back and watching some of these videos. I tried to pick commercials. Commercials are great if they're curated well, because they can make you have a very quick emotional response to something. This was a commercial for El País, the newspaper. And it asked, it went through all the major hot button controversial issues that are happening in the world. And then it stopped, it ended with, and you, what do you think? ¿Qué opinas? ¿Y tú, qué opinas? And so I started my class, my 1 hour with, why, you saw this video, ¿qué opinas? And just getting them started with, well, what do I think about the video, right? And I found many videos like that, that the students really got grabbed emotionally by them. So it forced me to really curate my material very carefully. Here's another. So I tried in every module, particularly in this conversation class, to have a cortometraje, a short film, and have them also related to the theme. So this was about a couple that typical arc of a relationship. They start out in love, and then it slowly starts to deteriorate, and it happens over a 3-minute period in this short film, right? So we could talk about their characteristics, how they live together or don't want to live together anymore, right? And how they mash together, and I could have questions online to have them already watch the video and then think through it. Again, this went beyond the book. The book wasn't going to cut it. The book that I did use, so again, the pushing everything online like this gave me a real opportunity to engage the students in a real way about diversity. And it really made me think hard about the kinds of material that I put in front of them. And if I'm going to have a conversation course, I want them to want to say something, right, in that hour. So if the material I thought from the book was too blasé, if it didn't speak to them, I tried to find things that were really going to speak to them. So, there's this NPR story called Yo Nena, which runs through the youngest person to ask for to change genders legally, and 9 years old. And so it's an interview with the mother and how and talks about the legal ramifications of that. And what's great about NPR is that they provide a transcript for each thing. So I can show you how I made some of these materials, even though they're authentic and maybe not, you would think not comprehensible to a lot of our learners. There's a lot of technology we can use to scaffold that and make it comprehensible, right? To bring it more into that +1 sweet spot that Krashen always talks about. Same with these articles a collection of articles I use, Difusión. I don't know if you're familiar with the platform or the editorial from the company from Spain, but they have an entire catalog of articles that they rewrite at different levels, and they label them A2, B1, etc. And they provide an audio, somebody reading them. So those are great because they're one-pagers. You can see on the right there that they have questions related to the article that you can build into an assignment online or in class, and they can listen as well as read. And this is one of the points that I want to bring up. Trying to make sure that I was multimodal, trying to make sure that there was listening comprehension, reading comprehension, speaking, interpersonal communication, all of the presentational communication, hitting all of the modes of communication, right? And thinking about how I was going to do that made me think every reading activity has to also be a listening activity. And that's a rule that I made for myself, that every reading activity had to have accompanying audio. And when I taught the literature class, I actually read into a microphone every reading in class and made that available. And in some cases, I put the video, the camera, right on the book and flipped the pages. I extracted the audio and put it into a podcast. And I asked the students, and I'm sorry, to the literature class here, but I think this became a very valuable exercise for me as an instructor. I learned a lot from that. My students reread the material. They read it multiple times. And when I read it, is they listened to it and read it themselves. And I found that my students differentiated that experience in many different combinations. Some of them listened to it first, then read it. themselves. Some of them read it themselves, then listened to it in the car on the podcast. Some of them followed along with me and read it. Some of them preferred just the audio and the book in front of them. Some wanted my video and follow along with the video. And I found that in my literature class, I feel silly almost that I didn't see this before, that I was missing an opportunity to make every reading a listening comprehension activity as well. And what I found was that hour, that physical hour I had with students in the literature class or in the conversation class. So we all do this in our classes. We give our students a reading, and then we say we're going to talk about it in class. And then the students struggle with that conversation. And we all sit there awkwardly and try to pull teeth, right, to talk about the reading. I found that by creating a listening comprehension activity out of the reading activity, the interpersonal communication went through the roof. They were all of a sudden had at their disposal models of how to say these words, how to pronounce the words. In this particular article you have in front of you, if I didn't provide how to say LGBTIQ in this case in Spanish, they all just flipped to English when they had to say that. You've had students that they give up, right? My students give up on years usually. They start with mil and 1967, right? They give up and then just say English is good enough in that case. Or this phrase was just, they didn't have it readily at their disposal, so they would just say the English. They didn't do that anymore because they heard me say it. Orgullo, the first word and the second word in the article. It's very difficult to pronounce, but they heard me say it. Or I'm sorry, in the record, this one was not me saying it. They heard the person, the native speaker saying it in the recording. And so the ability to converse face-to-face increased. And this is again anecdotal, but I felt that it was a much richer conversation. The next step would be to do a real study to see how that works. Okay, so I didn't make any of this up. This all, a lot of this was inspired by Michael Wesch, who is an anthropologist at Kansas State University. If you have not seen his 4 or 5 videos called Teaching Without Walls, I highly recommend it. It changed completely the way I think about my classes and about online education. He teaches anthropology. So in essence, he's teaching about human interaction, the same thing that we're teaching, right? And one of the fundamental things that he taught me was that, look, online means you're free to take your phone, to take a camera, to go out into the world and record things, and to have your students do that, to have them, you know, online doesn't mean that they have to be sitting behind their computers. They can be gathering data, having conversations. So I had assignments like that where students had to take their phone and record themselves, you know, narrating their morning routine. And we've all taught the morning routine. Why not have them walk around and show me what your morning routine is, right? Or, you know, what's your commute look like? Why don't you describe for me your commute to wherever you're going? You know, you can think of different ways. Narrate cooking a meal for me. Cook a meal, and I want you to take your phone and just narrate how to, I don't care if it's a simple sandwich. I want you to narrate how to do that particular meal, right? Things like that made you rethink how they might use the technology. And I started bringing my own travels into it, you know, more photographs of things that I've done or videos. So, and I would take my phone with me and remember, if I'm see a native speaker, I would ask them a few questions, say, hey, can I record you for my class? Let's do a little conversation. Or I started bringing those things into my teaching. Obviously I had, and so I wanted, one of the things that I was worried about, and what Michael Wesch told me was, you know, when we teach online, we worry about losing our being in charge of the class, being the face of the class. And one way to get around that is create a lot of videos. And I had lots of instruction with my face, but I also created this little icon for each module up in the upper left-hand corner. The professor explains, el profesor explique. So that's the flipped part where I had 5-minute explanations of a grammar point or an orientation to a module, but I made sure that it was labeled with my face, and I said el profesor explica, so that the students would really get the feeling that they're in my class, that I'm there for them, that I'm helping, and I am their guide through this the whole time, that they're not just lost with a bunch of materials uploaded online, that there's a person behind there all the time. It's not an ego thing. I think it's more of a trying to create some kind of level of familiarity with what they already know in terms of the classroom, right? And on the flip side of that, in the bottom right-hand corner, I brought in alums to talk about their experiences in my Spanish in the Workplace class now. I have students who are working in Spanish-speaking community that I can now bring in via Zoom and record it, embed it into my classes, and have them work through that material. So I'm noticing I'm talking. So I'm going to go quickly through some of the tools that I put together that help me put all this together. H5P is one of them. If you're not familiar with H5P, it's a whole suite of free tools. The one that I use the most is an interactive slideshow. And again, we can go back and look through this, but what I did was I created a slideshow of videos, YouTube videos, mostly, that would orient the students to each module and to kind of suck them into the topic of the module, mostly as inspiration. So I found the slideshow was a nice way for them not to keep scrolling. They could kind of slide through. It was more of a design decision. This tool I'm in love with, and I used it a lot. RemNote. RemNote allowed me to add text. So it's basically a note taker, but it's so much more than that. In a nutshell, I could give a whole hour talk on how I use RemNote. That's for another. Joe will have me back for another one. But it's RemNote. Basically, if you're familiar with Google Docs, it looks like a Google Doc. It acts like a Google Doc. But every time you create a bulleted list, every bullet automatically becomes a flashcard. So you can quickly create a bulleted list of vocabulary, add photos and things under the bulleted list, and it automatically creates a series of flashcards with a front and back. That's RemNote in a nutshell. It also, every entry, every word that you create links to every other page. So if you have a definition, if you write the same word multiple times, you just click on that word, and then it automatically, almost like a network, almost like a brain, extended brain, will find all the other times you've mentioned that particular word. So if you start to use RemNote, it becomes a networked catalog of any word you've ever looked up or come across. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but when you start to use it, and when I showed my students how to use it, this has become a lifelong learning tool for my students. They really start to invest in it and use it kind of consistently to catalog their own collection of words. And taking notes, they can take all their notes in it, and then all their notes are searchable from class to class and automatically linked between each other, and then they can instantly change all their notes into flashcards. It's a very interesting tool. The other tool that helped me pull all this off is called Perusal. So you can tell I'm really into annotation tools, but Perusal is, you can upload any document, website, PDF, etc., and it allows you to create a conversation around any word on the PDF. So you can see there, I have the word boss highlighted. That means a student clicked on it and they created a thread about that particular word. So we can have a whole discussion about boss. And in this particular case, so what you're looking at here, I made the students in one of my classes watch a series, a Spanish series called El Ministerio del Tiempo, and I uploaded the script. The scripts are all available online. So I uploaded the script. And so after they watched it, they then commented on the script. What cultural observations did you make? What questions do you have about what happened? And the level of conversation that we had was much richer than I've ever done before in doing this in a traditional, more face-to-face kind of course. And this one example, the students noticed that they were using vos a lot, and it's because the scene took place in the 1400s, when that is an old way of speaking Spanish, but also a current way of speaking Spanish in some Latin American countries. So we had this whole conversation about colonialism and how language evolves in some places, but then sticks in other places. And so it became this whole rich conversation about how it's used in different areas of the Spanish-speaking world, just by that one comment that a student made. Another essential tool I use all the time now is learn languages with YouTube or learn languages with Netflix. It is a Chrome extension that basically allows you to click on any word from the closed captioning of a video, of a YouTube video, and get a definition of that word. And it moves the transcript from the bottom, right? The subtitles from the bottom to the side. So you can scroll on the side of the video rather than on the bottom. Also, there's a tab that you can click on called Words, which basically extracts all the words in the subtitles and divides them by level of difficulty. So if you have a B2 student, they can just go down to level 8 and get a vocabulary list, right? They were not going to give them all the pronouns, the articles and things like that that they would already know from A1 or A2. It'll give them more difficult words that they can kind of focus on and then watch the video, having kind of focused on those 4 or 5 new vocabulary words. Amazing tool. So you can take a lot of authentic YouTube videos with authentic language, and this wrapping them in learn languages with YouTube makes it comprehensible. All of a sudden, something that wasn't comprehensible automatically is accessible. I should go back real quick. The other essential dictionary that I use, this icon on the bottom right, is Reverso. Reverso, I am a huge fan of because you can install it on a Mac or PC. It's a dictionary that you can have it hardwired into your computer. And what makes that happen is it allows you to hit Control and C twice on any word in any program on your computer and instantly get a definition. So it doesn't matter if you're in Word, online, in a PDF, any and all of these tools, there's one way students get used to looking up words. And it's quick and easy. And it, again, makes all this authentic material more comprehensible. And I'm a big fan of that. I think if you want to make something a little more comprehensible, make it very quick and easy for students to look up words, right? If it's too much of a hurdle for them to look up words, and then give them a quick and easy way to catalog those words. And that's why I had RemNote in there. So you can look it up really quick, Control CC, copy, paste it into RemNote, and within 10 seconds, once you get used to this, you have a flashcard and you have an instant record of what you looked up. And then each document can be everything you've ever read or looked at. You can catalog your vocabulary that you looked up. And you create this system so that the learner takes on this new way of engaging with the material that's going to stick with them beyond your classroom. That was a huge, huge revelation for me. And again, some of the other ones that I've used, obviously I use Zoom. I used an internal recording tool within Sakai. Sakai is our learning management system, but doesn't matter. You could use Google Classroom or whatever your course management system is. I didn't want to spend too much time looking at my own course management system because that's going to differ from person to person. It's more the concept. But I will say that I had a philosophy that I was going to lean on institutionally supported tools as much as possible. Because I wanted the students to have a level of familiarity, knowing that they were going to be jumping from technology to technology, from class to class. I was very strategic. If I went quote unquote rogue with something like RemNote, I had a really good reason, and I made sure in every one of my classes I have a module 0, which walks them through. It's basically they use all these tools to do assignments that don't count for anything, or they count for a minimal amount of points, 1 or 2 points, just so that we work out all the bugs, they get used to everything, and then we move into module 1, right? And that module 0 was really key. And that's in that module 0, I put a lot of videos of me explaining how to use RemNote, how to use YouTube, learn language with YouTube. Each one of these tools, I have a video explaining why why is really important, why I'm choosing this tool, because the student buy-in was very important, right? And also how. And so once they have that buy-in, they're hooked, and they'll do it. Now, is every student gonna have that buy-in? Absolutely not. So we're getting closer to the 4:30. I thought I didn't have enough material to cover an hour. So let me stop and make sure that no one is on there saying please stop. I can't take it anymore. What? Any questions?
It is absolutely the opposite, Kevin. We've had a little private message between Joe and myself, and we just said, oh, please just let him just continue. And
okay. I know, I realized I kept talking into the void, but I'm looking at Joe's face, but I have a few faces in front of me with nods, so I figured it's going fine. But I'll stop. Is there any questions or things that people also wanted to share before we run out of our time that we promised we would?
So we've got a couple of comments. Larissa is saying Reverso is my jam too, which is a great expression.
Yeah.
Helen was talking about I don't know how you pronounce it, actually. Is it Deep L or Deeple? Deeple. Okay. Have you heard of that one, Kevin? Have you used it? So it's a bit like it's like word reference type tool. Because
one of my students was telling me that it is using deep technology, and he knew what that was and told the rest of the class. So they've bought into that for that reason. So it's very clever.
I think a lot of language teachers use word reference as well. In addition to, well, I don't know how many people are using Reverso, but obviously you're a big fan of that. Would you say that they're similar?
Well, again, the big
word reference
differentiating feature for me was that having it installed on your computer. The thing about any of those online dictionaries is you have to take the time to open the browser, type in the name of it, even if you have it say bookmarked. I suppose you have that as well, but you still have to go and copy and paste, and it takes an extra second to do that. And I just wanted them to be able to hit a button, hit C twice, and they look it up, and it doesn't matter where you are in your computer or what program you're on. So to me, that was the real one. And the other thing I like about Reverso is and many of them do this, but it does a very good job of putting up front the word in context and giving you examples in real sentences, which is key for me, rather than just they have the online tool, the installed tool will give you a couple of ideas of what the word translates to, and then show you lots of examples in sentences, rather than a long official definition. So I like the way it puts just enough in front of you and the right kind of information in front of you So you're not spending a lot of time on each word.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen McFarlane in the chat has mentioned Lingui as well. I don't know if you know that one, Linguee,
Yes.
and about putting the, as you just said, the content into context as well in the sentences. That's another one to explore. This is great. I loved Helen's comment earlier about we've done 130 webinars. I thought we've covered everything, and we definitely would like you to come back, Kevin, if you were serious with that offer to do
Sure.
another step-by-step maybe into some of these tools. Well, that's brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
if you get some feedback from folks on what, where the interest was, we can blow that into a more targeted thing.
Well, I think definitely RemNote seems to be going down well for sure. That's brilliant.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I'll bring in a student of mine for that one who's doing a lot of work with me on RemNote. She's one who's really gravitated towards it, and she started a research project on it. So it might be nice to bring her in for that.
Sounds perfect. Fantastic.
Great.
Are there any other things you'd like to share with us? This has been great.
Well, this is my last slide. So
okay.
There's me. If you're looking for me on, I have a Twitter handle, but you can also find me at kevin.gaugler@marist.edu. And this is a video of me in my kitchen. I thought it would be funny during the pandemic when I was creating these videos for class. When you're talking about food, I said, let me do one in the kitchen, but wouldn't it be funny if I wore a full suit cooking? And so I did this thing in a full suit. And so that I just wanted to show that how it made me kind of break the mold a little bit on some of my instruction. So thank you guys. This was a very pleasant experience, and I want to thank everybody for making it such.
Well, it's been our pleasure that you've shared your practice with us and introduced us to some new ideas and been very honest about the context that you found yourself in and what you did about it. And it's lovely that Barbara's been writing comments in the chat as well. In fact, we've just had a lovely evening. It's been really great. So thank you so much, Kevin, for doing this. And of course, we'd love to have you back in 2022.
Thank you.
Can I say thank you as well again to you, Joe, for introducing us to Kevin, and definitely we want you back. As other people are saying, and I've said I have actually been writing notes as you've been doing it, and I did think 130 webinars, we'd seen every app there was, but really so many of those were new, and I loved the title as well. It just was in my mind all the time, that song. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's important, again, just to kind of, I guess, wrap up with something to take away, is for us all to reflect a little bit on what we changed and what should stay, right? I hear, and I think it's an important conversation, because a lot of my colleagues are just waiting for the day we can go back to the way it was. And I don't think that's the healthy way to think about this. I don't think we should just snap back to whatever we were doing pre-pandemic. I think that's a naive way of looking at things, that we can all learn from this and move forward and take this opportunity to really advance our field and help, create a better learning environment for our students.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm sure, as you've been interested in this area for years and years and years, it must have been fascinating to see how things have changed as a result of the pandemic. And maybe some of your colleagues who maybe were reluctant to use the technology before have come more on board. Of course, you're always going to get some Luddites, as it were, who just are desperate to go back to the way things were. But I'm sure you've seen some of your colleagues as well who've embraced new ideas. I'm sure you've been, people's best friend, as it were, in relation to what would you do for this, or how would you do this, Kevin, or has that been the case, or how has that worked out with working with your colleagues about? Have they been sort of asking you for help and support and ideas?
Yeah. Well, I've been in, Barbara is what got me started in computer-assisted language learning. I don't know if people know this, but she was my mentor at the University of Connecticut when I was getting my graduate degree, and she introduced me to the entire field and showed me the ropes. So I wouldn't be doing any of this if it wasn't for Barbara Lindsay here. And so, it's been typically you know, it was then, and it still is now to a certain extent, the computer assisted language learning field has been a bit of a marginal thing. You know, it's not something the MLA in the United States is really recognizing. And even, you know, ACTFL in the United States, we talk a lot about technology, but there really isn't that that thrust to centralize this field of computer assisted language learning. And then outside of languages, it's even more so, where, you know, faculty were just reluctant to use a lot of this technology because, yeah, I'm tenured, I don't have to do this. I've got my notes. What I'm doing works for me. Why should I change things? And all of a sudden, I found me and other colleagues I was talking to, all of a sudden, we're very valuable. Our, you know, this thing that we've been doing all along, you know, finding very thoughtful ways to get students engaged, right? Look, our field is unique in that we're the only field, I'm going to say this and it's probably wrong, but I'm pretty confident it's right. We're the only field that has traditionally had a lab dedicated to just the learning of our field. So the audiolingual lab, you know, if you think of chemistry labs, or that was more of a research lab, right? All the other disciplines that have a lab, it was to move research along. But we had a lab to move learning along since the 50s, right? And is the audiolingual method. So we've been thinking about how to simulate place. You know, why did we have an audiolingual lab? Because, well, you can't travel to that place. There's too much of a hurdle. And so we found ourselves in a situation where no one could travel anywhere. And so we had all those skills that as a field that we had been building up since the 40s, all of a sudden were useful. And useful to disciplines outside of languages. And that's what happened. And not just me, a lot of colleagues I talked to in the field of call said the same thing. All of a sudden their phone was ringing off the hook. And we've been for decades that linchpin between the human element of the pedagogy and the technology. So an instructional technologist doesn't quite do what we've done, and a pure pedagogist doesn't quite do what we've done. So it's an important piece in the middle that hopefully will get recognized.
Yeah, thank you so much for those final words. I think that's an incredibly important message, and that's why Helen and myself put together these Tilt webinars to try and support as many language teachers as possible, not just in the UK, but anywhere in the world who wanted to watch the recordings or wanted to attend live. Yeah, we're very much singing from the same hymn sheet, I think. So it's brilliant. Yeah. Wow, what a fantastic webinar. Over to you, Helen. Do you want to finish?
It's just nice to have company as well, wasn't it? I was saying to Joe, during those months, it was lovely. We built this community of people and we're all looking forward to seeing each other. And for you all to know, I'm trying to plan that we have a physical get together in April, possibly at our school, and we're near airports, Gatwick and Heathrow, so anybody's welcome. So we're hoping to be able to get that together, because it's at the school, it won't cost us anything. So, you know, whoever comes, that'd be great to see you. But thank you again to all of you. And we've got some brave people who've opened up their videos. I'm about to take a little photo now. So if there's anybody else who'd like to just do that, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'm just going to do a little photo now. So here goes. So 1, 2, 3. Oh, Jérôme, you were just joining. I'm going to take another one. Come on, Cheryl. Right, and Larissa's back. Right. Oh, right. Let's start again. So here goes. And 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And are you all looking sensible? You are. So I've got a nice one. Great. Thank you.
Love it.
I'll go onto the website along with the chat and the link to the video, which Joe will be putting up. And I'll stop the recording now, shall I?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Awesome.